Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Liz Horton, Senior Vice President of your Greenville Chamber. We host these Community Matters discussions the second and fourth Tuesday of each month to connect you to local, state, and national leaders. You can find past recordings as well as the upcoming Community Matters schedule by visiting our website at greenvillechamber.org. Just a few housekeeping notes. All attendees should currently be on mute with cameras turned off. However, we do want this to be an interactive discussion, so please submit any feedback and questions through the chat feature throughout the program. Today, we're speaking with Robyn Knox. Robyn is an experienced HR leader with over 25 years of human resources experience in the manufacturing industry. As an HR executive, Robyn developed innovative HR strategies across all facets of human resources. Robyn was recognized as the 2016 Greenville SHRM HR Professional of the Year, and she was recognized by the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and South Carolina SHRM State Council as the 2017 South Carolina HR Professional of the Year. Welcome, Robyn, and good morning. I know you have a lot of information to share with us today regarding burnout in the workplace, and so I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz, and I want to thank everyone for attending today. This is, for me, one of the most passionate topics that I can discuss with any leaders in the workplace or HR professionals in a workplace. And I want to just share with you a little bit about my story and why burnout is, to me, one of the biggest crisis I believe that we have right now in our country that we need to, as leaders, start addressing. So as Liz mentioned, I've been in HR for over 25 years. And if you had asked me for the majority of my career, whether or not I would have continued working if I won the lottery, my answer would have been yes, absolutely. Even though, as you may have read in my bio or the introduction to this session, I truly have always been a workaholic. And so when I last year or 2 years ago now started experiencing an increased level of what I would consider unmanageable stress, always thought I thrived in a stressful environment, but as it became somewhat unmanageable, I started looking into what was that, what was the causes, and I personally experienced burnout. Again, this was around year 24, 25 years of experience that I had in HR at this point. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my story as we go through this session today. But I wanted just to give you a little background information so that you'll understand why I'm speaking on the subject today. I'm not a clinical psychologist by any definition, not even an industrial organizational psychologist, but being an HR professional, someone who's witnessed burnout in the workplace and then having been a more recent person experiencing it myself, this again is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I'm assuming it is yours as well, since you're participating in today's session. So again, just a little bit more about my story. After about 25 years in HR, I did decide it was time for me to do something different. So I didn't know what that was at the time that I turned in a resignation. I just knew that I couldn't think through the next steps for me personally. And so I worked an 8-week notice, quit a very successful career in HR, and then decided to spend some time doing some introspection and deciding what my next steps were going to be. Well, I regained my love. I figured out that it is a personal passion of mine to help people reach their fullest potential, but to also help workplaces be the very best that they can possibly be. So I started my own business, the HR Business Connect, and this is just one thing that I do as part of my new business. So thank you for having me today, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to participate. So we'll get started talking about our agenda, I wanted just to give you a quick overview of everything that we're going to be reviewing today. So we're going to define burnout versus stress, because they are two different things. And we're going to talk about some of the causes of burnout, the impact that burnout has not only on your employees, possibly you personally, but certainly the workplaces. And then we're going to also go into prevention, which is going to be critical for us to now coming out of this pandemic, for us to start slowing the trend and perhaps reversing the trend that we're seeing in our workplaces. And I'm also going to focus on this from an individual and employer perspective. And when I say this is really us, because I do want this to be an interactive session. So I'm going to be asking you a number of questions as we go through this morning's session. So I would encourage you, please, to utilize the chat feature to comment on some of the things that we're discussing about, share personal experiences or some examples that you think might be beneficial to those who are participating in today's session. So in addition to prevention, again, we're going to also go into the recovery process for those who've gotten to that point that I got to a year or so ago. And then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. So let's move on to talk about burnout and what is burnout. So if any of you have done much studying or research on burnout, you may have discovered that finally, after probably about 40 years of workplaces using the topic and employees using the term rather of burnout to describe what they're experiencing in their workplace, now the World Health Organization has finally included this as a true topic or syndrome or disease. So it's been added to their international classification of diseases. And they identify it as a syndrome that's conceptualized as resulting from workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So most of us have stressors in our daily lives, whether it's our personal life, but certainly our work lives. Very few positions or jobs have zero stress associated with them. But when it becomes unmanageable and it's occurring on a frequent basis, then that's when it could step over into burnout. And it's really characterized by three different areas or three different dimensions. One of those is that feeling of energy depletion. So if you think about it, when you're describing stress, a lot of times the basic symptoms that we think about are things such as exhaustion, where the very idea of maybe chronic of going into work may create some level of chronic fatigue, trouble sleeping, or physical problems, though, is when it goes from that stress level and that exhaustion or tiredness or fatigue into possibly burnout. And that's when it becomes that ongoing prolonged stress that we have a more difficult time dealing with. The other dimension, though, is increased mental distance from one's jobs or feelings of negativity towards the job, or even cynicism when it's in relation to somebody's job, or even maybe people that they're working with. And for burnout, it's really when it becomes excessive. If you remember that song, if you're my age, many years ago called Take This Job and Shove It, it's almost when people reach that point that they feel like they can walk out the door tomorrow with no income, no idea of what they're going to do next, but they've had enough. And they know that it's not good for their own well-being or their family's well-being. They're frustrated perhaps at work or with their job in particular, or this job specifically. Maybe they're no longer putting in that extra effort That's another example of being mentally distanced from work. If you take someone who has always been a high achiever, and many of you on the call probably fit that category, but all of a sudden you just don't feel like putting in that extra effort when you may have done that your entire career, then it's time to do that check. Perhaps it has crossed over into something known as burnout. Also, if you start avoiding the social contacts or withdrawing into yourself, that would be an example of that increased mental distance from your job or your coworkers. And then the third dimension that I wanted to touch on is that reduced personal efficacy. And for you that may not really understand what that means, efficacy is really your personal feelings of accomplishment. So if you've been a workaholic your entire life, like I have been, but you truly feel like every hour of every day is rewarding, or you're making a difference in the workplace or in the lives of your employees, for example, then you're probably not going to cross over into this category. But if you're starting to doubt and have self-confidence, perhaps in your talents, your skills, your abilities, then you may now have experienced this additional element that contributes to burnout. And this is when you start having those negative feelings about yourself. You know, as Liz mentioned, I was recognized by the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and SHRM State Council a few years ago as being the HR Professional of the Year. I honestly, towards right before I resigned, started questioning whether I was even good at my job anymore, whether I was a talented HR professional or not, or whether I should just consider changing careers altogether. You start losing self-confidence, and maybe you just don't even trust in your abilities any longer. So if that's happening to you, then perhaps that level of stress that you may have handled quite well has crossed now over into what's known as burnout. So those are the three dimensions. But I do want to separate stress and burnout just a little bit further. Stress is characterized often by overengagement. For some of us, it may fuel us. It may give us that additional pep in our step, so to speak. If we know we have tight deadlines or we're working on a major project, maybe that additional stress is going to help us over the finish line. However, when it moves over into burnout, that's when it becomes characterized maybe by disengagement instead of overengagement. Stress can also have your emotions being overactive, whereas when it's crossed over to burnout, your emotions are more blunted. Maybe you don't feel anymore. You're just tired and exhausted. Stress sometimes gives you that sense of urgency and hyperactivity versus burnout, which is you feeling more helpless or hopeless. Stress, loss of energy versus burnout is total loss of motivation, ideals, hope. And then it can become a lot more serious where, stress, you may have, if you don't handle stress quite so well, then maybe it could lead to anxiety disorders or create some physical damage, could kill you prematurely. But burnout could lead serious burnout, could lead to detachment and depression. The primary damage is no longer just physical, but it's emotional, where it may take you a long time emotionally to recover from the effects of burnout. It's not a quick fix, like take a long nap, go to the beach for a weekend, and you can recover from burnout like perhaps you can from stress. And then for some people, it may make it where life doesn't seem worth living. Now, fortunately, I didn't experience this, but I do have to say that, sitting in Texas Roadhouse one night having dinner, and I looked at the waitress, I thought, boy, that job looks very appealing to me. I wonder how much money I could earn in a year as a waitress. And to go from a seasoned 25-year HR professional back to my teenage years as a waitress, that was a wake-up call for me that something needed to be done. Okay, so I am curious as to burnout that you may have experienced. So I want to talk a little bit about two different time frames when it comes to burnout. So I've got a question for you. So in 2019, what percentage of full-time employees would you say were feeling burned out of work, either very often or always? So in the chat, I want you to put whether you think that was 8%, 18%, or 28%. So I'm curious, again, in the chat, what do you think? What would be your best guess? A 28, 18? So I'm seeing some responses coming through, 18%, 28, 18. No takers for 8%. Okay. 18. Yeah. So in actuality, it was around 28%. And this is according to a 2019 Gallup study. And again, if you think of stress, where, there may have been 48% of the workforce in this study who said they sometimes felt burned out. Well, that's not really meeting the definition of stress that we just talked about, where it was uncontrollable and unmanageable, where it occurred on a more frequent basis. But in addition to that 48% who sometimes felt that way, there was 28% who said that it was very often or always. So it is a pretty high percentage. Let's look at what you think maybe the pandemic did to our levels of burnout. So on the next slide, we've got a question here for you. So in 2020, what do you guess our levels of burnout would have been? So do you think it was 36%, 56%, or 76%? All right, I'm seeing some answers. 56, 76%, 76%, 36%. Don't we wish it was 36%? 76%, 76. Yeah, so my guess is those of you who are saying 76%, then you felt it personally. Either you have experienced it yourself, you've talked to your coworkers who've been experiencing burnout, you've seen it in your job, how it has increased substantially or significantly. The answer is truly 76%. There was a recent article by Catherine Meyer in HR Executive Magazine. And when I say recent, I mean, it was earlier this month. And she was quoting a December study where there were, I think, well over 1,000 US adults who were surveyed. And they were asked how many of them were currently experiencing burnout. And the answer was 76%. There was similar data that was found from a group called Limeade, a company that, pre-COVID, they were surveying their employees. They were trying to get a handle on what was creating issues within their workforce. And they found that 42% of their workers were feeling burned out at that point. Well, a few months into COVID, they surveyed their employee population again, and that number had shot up from 42% to 72%. So significant impact. And we all know there's probably a ton of reasons why. And so I'd like for us to have a little dialogue in chat. And before I start sharing with you some of the causes of burnout, I would really like for you to share with us. And I'm going to advance these slides, or ask Andrew to advance the slides for us. I want to know, what do you think are the causes of burnout? So if you would, put that in the chat feature. Yeah, change can be very difficult under normal circumstances. Absolutely. Lack of work-life balance, lack of recognition, uncertainty. Yeah, constant connectivity. Oh, how many of you truly felt like your job expanded in terms of the number of hours a day that you were expected to be available? You were receiving emails from others. And, when you receive an email, you feel like you almost need to respond. Yep, agree with some of the other comments, 100%. Crisis mode at work, not enough staff. And it's one of those things where when we are shorthanded in our workplaces, what do? We expect more of others. We ask others to work overtime to help cover for those who are either absent or for those that have decided to leave our organization. Sandwich generation. Oh my goodness, that's a good one. I remember that point in my career and how stressful it could have been or was. Fortunately, it didn't lead to burnout for me, but I also wasn't trying to homeschool my child. And so many working adults have had to do that this last year. Yeah, fear of getting sick, all of the above, no end in sight. Yeah. When I left my job, it was pre-COVID. And one of the things that, as an organization that others may have found exciting was every conversation we were having about growth, because the organization had grown substantially through acquisitions through the years. And, that was exciting for a lot of folks. For me, it was that no end in sight. You take a workaholic who's working 12 and 14-hour days, and now they're working 14, 16-hour days. And we're going to continue to grow, and my role is going to continue to expand, and I'm going to get further and further removed from the types of things that I enjoy doing. So yeah, what may be exciting to some may not be exciting to others, particularly when they see that there is no way for them to escape that or no end in sight. Good. Expectation, because it can be done. Yep, it should be done. Great feedback. So thank you all so much for participating and for sharing your thoughts. I do want to share with you some additional information that has come about via well over 30 years of research. So in the Harvard Business Review article that was published earlier this year called Beyond Burnout, Jennifer Moss quoted some research that has been done by who I consider to be probably the most recognized researchers, Christina Maslach, Suzanne Jackson, and Michael Leiter. And they review the 6 main causes, or identify the 6 main causes of burnout. So I want to talk about those briefly. The first one being that unsustainable workload. And we've really talked about that in the chat. A number of you have identified that this has been an issue post-COVID or during COVID, but certainly it was an issue for a number of working adults prior to COVID. Gallup analytics show that the number of hours that people work each week really doesn't matter, with the burnout risk increasing greatly though. So again, the hours may not matter as much as if you enjoy what you're doing, you may be willing to put in longer hours. But if you're not at that point where you're thriving and you're enjoying it and you're passionate about it, then Gallup's research shows that burnout risk does increase substantially if you're exceeding an average of 50 hours per week. And it escalates even more substantially if you're putting in 60 hours a week. So if you have, during the period of COVID, if you were putting in at least 50 hours on average a week, I would just love to see how many whys or yeses we would have in the chat. Did this describe you? And if it didn't describe you, did it describe maybe your spouse or a friend, someone that you were really close to? So again, in the chat, maybe a Y or a yes. And if it didn't describe you, then we may need to tap into you when we get to prevention and stress or prevention of burnout. So feel free to put a no if it didn't describe you. Oh, wow. Yes, yes, yes. At least 65 hours a week. Oh, my goodness. Short periods of time, maybe that would be stress. Longer periods of time, it's going to be difficult to keep that from moving into burnout. Yes, until you change jobs. Great one. So that is certainly a way that people can recover. Husband was experiencing it. So again, so many people, whether it was us personally or others that we know, had that unsustainable workload. We as organizations need to start looking at what we can do about that, right? So there are a few interesting pandemic-related facts that may have contributed to the higher rates of burnout. One is that the average, if you could go back just a moment to the previous slide, Andrew, I'm going to talk about this one for just a few more minutes, but the average workday did increase by 49 minutes last year. And according to a Harvard Business School study, there was an 8.3% increase in emails that were sent out after normal business hours, and a 13% increase in the number of meetings that people attended last year. Now, I don't know about you, but I have always dreaded meetings. I don't know many people who say, oh, I just love attending meetings. So why in the world did we add more meetings last year, knowing that there was already this additional level of stress added to our workforce? So lack of control, I want to talk about that one as well. So being in HR through the years, I heard a lot of complaints about management styles. Does anyone want to guess in the chat what type of management style frustrates the employees the most, and what rises to my top of the list in terms of why employees came to see me about their manager? Yes. So Casey, you nailed it. It's micromanaging. Yes. So micromanagement, where you have no control over your job, perhaps you're being told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. I've always found it somewhat ironic that, we strive as companies to hire the best and the brightest talent, but when we get them on board, we don't allow them to use those talents, or some managers, I should say, don't allow them to use those talents. You're not going to be able to keep someone engaged, or you're not going to be able to retain them very long within your organizations. If you hire someone who is the cream of the crop, so to speak, and they can't prove their worth and can feel like they're contributing over their own job. The other one is mismatched values and skills. Maybe you're not doing the work that you're passionate about. So employees took a job and it's more of for a paycheck versus something that gives them true meaning and that sense of accomplishment when they leave work at the end of the day. I don't know if you're a fan of Patrick Lencioni, but he's done a lot of work around teams and healthy workplace behavior. But he's come out with this new thing called Working Genius, this new assessment. And it's basically very similar to some of the work Gallup's done through the years about people should really work in their strength zones, because there's certain things that we do during the day that gives us energy, and there's certain things that depletes our energy. So if you're experiencing burnout, it could be that your job, you don't feel like you're contributing with the right skills on a day in and day out basis, or the job may be misaligned with your core values. If you're someone who values honesty and integrity, you're likely not going to stick around for an organization and work for an organization that you perceive as unethical. So another area is insufficient rewards for efforts. Most people think that compensation and benefits when I talk about this, but it's actually more social and psychological. It's appreciation or recognition for doing a great job, getting that occasional thank you or a compliment when you share an idea for speaking up and voicing your opinion, if you feel like it's recognized and rewarded and appreciated, then those are the types of rewards that people are looking for in the workplace. Perceived lack of fairness, this covers more like perceived unfair treatment around workplace issues. Is there a perception that there's favoritism or that there's inconsistently applied policies or practices? Who's getting promoted? Do you feel like you should have been promoted or you were overlooked for promotion? So is there that lack of fairness? According to Gallup's study that they did back in 2019, if employees strongly agree that they are often treated unfairly at work, they're 2.3 times more likely to experience a high level of job burnout. So as employers, again, we really need to look at how we're treating our employees and what that perception of fairness is. And then lack of supportive community. And this is relationships that you have at work or surrounded to the type of work that you do. So it could be a relationship with your boss, your team, maybe other support departments in your workplace, could even be vendors that you interact with on a daily basis, or your network. For me, I was in HR for, like I said, forever. And one of the things I had as part of that community was an HR network that I could go to and spend time with and converse with. That was a supportive community for me. But as my workload increased more and more, it was difficult to even find the time to interact with my HR colleagues. So that part of my supportive community went away. And so again, it's not just necessarily internal to your organization, but it could be related to your career in general. Are you surrounded, when we talk about coworkers, are you surrounded by people who are negative or gossiping or bullying? Those, if so, you're not in a supportive community and you need to distance yourself from that. The other thing I would say is that lack of supportive community, a term that I've heard, is disruptive competition. So is there too much of this competition that's become disruptive, where it's political in your workplace? There's backstabbing going on in your workplace. Are employees operating from a state of fear? Do you see that some of your best employees who used to contribute, share ideas, are now afraid to speak up because of their words being used against them? So those are a lot of different elements of things that we would experience in the workplace. And certainly burnout is an issue that needs to be addressed as an occupational issue. It shouldn't all be on us as individuals, even though I am certainly going to share some tips for that. But there are some lifestyle causes that make some people more susceptible to burnout than others. And I'm just, maybe some of these describe you. If so, I would be curious if I hit something that resonates with you, maybe just put a yes in the chat. But, one example of a personal lifestyle cause is working too much without having time for socializing and relaxing. So are you not taking the needed time for yourself? Does that describe you? So there's things you can do outside of work to recharge as well. So if you're not recharging, then that's going to affect whether or not you burn out more quickly in the workplace. Having a lack of close supportive relationships outside of the workplace may impact whether you experience burnout in the workplace. Taking on too many responsibilities without enough help. A lot of people have what they call FOMO, that fear of missing out. This is something I've always been guilty of. I want to be involved in everything. Anybody that asks me for something, I want to say yes. Saying no is challenging for me. So that would be another example. And then one that I wish someone had helped me with when I was younger is not getting enough sleep. I mean, I'm curious, how many of you get 7 hours, at least 7 hours of sleep at night? If you get 7 hours of sleep, I want to see that in the chat, because that's probably one of the most important things that you can do when it comes to recharging and regrouping, is getting enough sleep at night. Yes, sleep is elusive. That's a good one there, Liz. I absolutely agree with you. And then again, there's some personality traits too that would certainly impact the cause of burnout. If you're a perfectionist and you have perfectionist tendencies, a pessimistic view of yourself and the world, the need to be in control. High achievers experience burnout at a significantly high rate compared to others as well. So those are some of the main causes of burnout, but I want us to talk about the impact on employees. And we know from an earlier slide that burnout can be extremely serious, if it's left untreated. In extreme cases, it could lead to thoughts of suicide even. So I want to make sure we've uncovered a fairly complete list of burnout symptoms and potential signs that you can look for in your employees or coworkers or even yourself. So in the chat, I'd love for you to add your thoughts on how you think burnout affects individuals. So whether you've personally experienced burnout, how did it impact you? How did it affect you? If you've seen it impact friends, colleagues, how did it impact them? How did it manifest itself? So time management suffers. That's a good one, Nikki. Yeah. Becoming disengaged. Absolutely. Just unmotivated, more prone to outburst. Oh gosh. So your emotions may be out of whack, right? The least little thing could set you off. Poor attitudes towards others. Poor morale certainly affects your attitude, but the attitude of everyone else. You're like a cloud over your coworkers. Becoming disengaged, and rise of health issues. Absolutely. If you're seeing that someone's missing a lot of time from work and they've never done that before and they're more sickly than they've ever been before, then it could be that they're experiencing burnout. Yes, and it definitely ripples over to their family interactions. They may have a lack of patience with others, difficulty completing tasks. That is a great list. Just a few others. Frequent headaches and muscle pain. And I know we've talked about sickness. There is truly an effect on the entire immune system. So it will manifest itself in sickness if someone is experiencing burnout. There could be a loss of appetite or sleep, sense of failure and self-doubt also creeps in if someone experiences burnout. Casey said that sustained high levels of cortisol causes lifelong problems and can reduce life expectancy. Absolutely. So that's the reason you don't mess around with burnout. And we as employers and leaders, we've got to address this. Isolating yourself from others, procrastinating. People begin using food or drugs or alcohol to cope in severe cases. People jokingly say, oh, I need to go home and have a glass of wine. But you need to start listening to the kind of comments that your coworkers are making, because they may be asking for an ear or someone to help them through some of the frustrations that they have. Okay. So those are the impacts on employers. I want to talk about the impact on workplaces. So many of you participating in this session today, you're in leadership positions within your organization. So I know you've probably witnessed, not only the effects on individuals, but I'd love for you to share, how do you think it impacts your organization, or how has burnout, particularly the increased burnout that we've seen over this last year, how has it impacted your organization? So if anyone would like to share in the chat, that would be great. Turnover. Yeah, turnover percentages have increased. Thank you, Renee, for sharing that. Presenteeism and absenteeism is extremely costly. Yeah, according to Gallup, burned out employees are 63% more likely to take a sick day. So chances are your absenteeism has increased. And many of you may have heard the term presenteeism, where there's lower productivity and lower performance because someone may be there, but they mentally have checked out. The annual cost of lost productivity due to that presenteeism is $550 billion. And when it comes to turnover, we know that turnover breeds more turnover. So if we don't get a handle on burnout, that the increased turnover in our organization is just going to create more turnover. Empathy, that's a good one. We definitely are going to explore that. And not meeting key results of the organization. Also a very good example of how it impacts the workforce. If you have a disengaged workforce, people are just trying to focus their energy and efforts in daily survival, not developing for the future. And you're going to begin to lose that reputation in the community. If word gets out that you have a burn and churn type of culture in your workplace, you're going to not only lose that reputation, you're going to have difficulty in recruiting others into your open positions. And then again, you have other people work longer hours to try to compensate for that. So there's no doubt burnout's prevalent in our country. And we discussed so many ways that it negatively impacts individuals and businesses. So can we successfully prevent burnout? I would say yes, we can. So let's talk about that for just a moment. I don't want to do this from an individual perspective, but also from that of an employer or leader. And one of the reasons I want to explore things that you can do as an individual is because you must take care of yourself before you take care of others. If you think about a flight attendant, the instructions that they give you, place your own oxygen mask on first. Well, the same applies to burnout. You've got to take care of yourself as an individual. And to help you remember this, I've just tried to simplify it into the 3 R's. So the 3 R's of burnout, for an individual, things that you can do to prevent it. You need to recognize the warning signs. We've talked about some warning signs. You need to recharge and reverse the damage that's been done. And you need to rest and build some resilience. So going to the next slide. In addition to things that you can do as an individual, I would really love for us, and I know we're getting very short on time, but really love to point out a few things that you can do, such as doing a self-assessment. If you think you may be experiencing signs of burnout, there is a Maslick burnout inventory that looks at the 3 dimensions we've talked about. It's called MBI. Highly encourage you to do that self-assessment rather than trying to do like I did and figure it out on your own. And it identifies 5 profiles that occur in the workplace, and it can be an extreme of burnout versus engagement. Someone is highly engaged, but it also may recognize or identify individuals who are just overextended. So there's still a lot of hope. We just need to address their hours. People who are ineffective, and then people who are just plain disengaged. So this survey or this assessment may be beneficial for you. You may want to even offer it to your employees or make sure that they're aware of it. And to recharge it and reverse the damage, you want to think about mindfulness and self-care. Mindfulness is that state of understanding and awareness. And then self-care is things that we can do. And if you could back up that slide just one moment. Yeah. And I want to use the analogy of a cell phone battery. So when your battery starts getting a little bit lower, say it gets down to, or way low, it gets down to maybe 5%. All you've got to do is plug your cell phone in for just a few minutes into the outlet, and it's going to jump on up there pretty quickly. So that 10% may end up being 50%, in a matter of 30 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on what kind of phone you have. So think about that when it comes to recharging. There's sometimes throughout the day where you feel your energy sinking, you're getting overwhelmed. Treat yourself like a cell phone battery. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, get up and walk, take some deep breaths, regroup, re-energize yourself. And you may have to do that frequently. So that could be one way to do it. And then longer term, there may be times when you have to go up to a full charge because you know you've got a major project going on. So getting up to 40 or 50% of your battery is not going to do it. So you may need to take some time off from work. You may need to take a day. Some companies are offering mental health days now to recharge or regroup. And then there's other things that you can do, such as taking a much longer weekend. You may need to do a reset or a complete shutdown of your cell phone to get that battery to operate effectively. So the amount of time that you need for yourself may be based on where you are in the spectrum of burnout. So again, reset, build resilience, take action to prevent further reoccurrence. And, you know, there's a lot of different things that you can do here. And I wish we had time to involve the audience in chat, but I'm just going to highlight a few things instead. You know, you want to limit your contact with negative people. That's one thing that you can certainly do. So particularly if you're in that environment where people are bringing you down and it's depleting your energy. So don't go away for a week to try to regroup and reset and come back into that same environment and spend your time with the people that are weighing you down. So that's one way. You need to turn to other people, maybe develop a broader network of people within your organization who may fuel your energy level. Reframe the way that you look at work. You know, find some more balance in your entire life. Now, so there may not be any true work-life balance left in this world, but can you find more balance in your daily activities or your lives? Take time off. Do you know that the U.S. Travel Association last year said that Americans forfeited 33% of their paid time off? And that probably surprised me, not from a perspective that it's uncommon for people to do that, but because of last year's was so stressful for everyone with COVID, I would have thought that more people would have been looking to take additional time off to reboot and regroup. I've personally been one of those that have always forfeited vacation and left it on the table. I don't recommend it. So in hindsight, I would do that differently. And reevaluate your priorities, set boundaries, take a break from technology, shut that cell phone off, nourish your creativity, do some things different to reset, and have some relaxation time for yourself. Get plenty of sleep, make exercise a priority, and again, take some time away from the stressors to breathe deeply. Okay, now prevention of burnout from an employer perspective, there are 3 Ds that I would encourage you to do. Diagnose the issues that are causing burnout within your organization. You want to develop and equip your managers and leaders to recognize those warning signs. Hopefully you've recognized some of them now, but your managers and leaders need to recognize those, and they need to know how to respond effectively. And then design a culture of well-being that extends throughout the entire employee life cycle. So want to explore this a little bit further as well, and just give you some additional tips that fall under those 6 main causes that we talked about earlier: the unsustainable workload, lack of control, mismatched values and skills, insufficient rewards for effort, lack of fairness, lack of supportive community. So again, remember, you want to evaluate each cause of burnout carefully, and a good way to do this is through an engagement survey. You know, if you've already administered engagement surveys, you probably realize that most of those causes of burnout are things that we capture on engagement surveys. So we may have a pulse on our organization, and we just haven't looked at it from the perspective of burnout. Engagement surveys and exit interviews can also pinpoint if there's specific issues in an individual department or area of your business. So do you have toxic leaders? Do you have micromanagers? It may show on an engagement survey as well. Secondly, you want to develop and equip your managers and leaders, again, to recognize those warning signs. And manager support is essential to preventing burnout. You know, challenges arise if there's not supportive managers in the workplace. According to Gallup, though, employees who strongly agree that they feel supported by their manager are 70% less likely to experience burnout on a regular basis. So, how would your employees classify your management team or your leaders? Are they supportive? Are they micromanagers? Or are they toxic? And trust me, if they're toxic, then it's time to remove them from your workplace if you want to truly protect others that are within your care. And third, again, was to design that culture of well-being. That could include reviewing your policies and practices for fairness. You know, do you encourage vacation? Are you encouraging people to unplug while they're on vacation? Are you adding more vacation time? Are you adding mental health days? Should you consider doing that? You know, you might want to do some market surveys to see what other companies are doing in the area, particularly in this tight labor market. You want to revamp or invest in your onboarding process, because this should start day one. When you're designing a culture of well-being, it should be for the entire employee life cycle, not just for those employees that are on the verge of experiencing burnout. So you want to hire employees who will be a good fit for the job. They'll be living their passion or working in their area of working genius. You want to develop social connections from day one. You can do that through having mentoring programs or affinity groups. And as a manager and going through the onboarding process, make sure that you're introducing your new hires to other people in their organization. You can utilize assessment tools to help you understand the needs and motivations of your workforce and to improve communication between managers and employees. And then assess whether or not you have interactions and opportunities even for social interaction and for people to participate in activities that align with their passion. For instance, maybe they can participate on a employee community activity project. So, you know, at my former company, we used to do a lot of things with United Way. We would get volunteers to help us organize and plan that. So it gives someone a break from their day-to-day task and gives them an opportunity to do something that they may be more personally aligned with from a value perspective. You want to encourage teamwork and review your benefit plans. You know, what type of wellness programs do you have in place? You know, do you have financial wellness programs that encourage physical activity or healthy eating? Do you have employee assistance programs in place? So make sure your workforce is aware of everything that you're doing that could offer assistance. Offer training to employees on topics such as stress, emotional intelligence, empathy, mindfulness practices, and other wellness-related topics. And then make sure your performance goals and performance metrics are within an individual's control. Because if they're outside of their control, but they're being measured on it, then they're 55% less likely. Or if they're being measured on it as outside of their control, then they are more likely to experience burnout on a frequent basis. Also, question whether or not mental health is a taboo topic at your organization. It shouldn't be. You should be openly discussing the need for people to take care of themselves, whether you're doing that through town halls and through the examples that your leaders are setting within the organization. You know, question your own practices. Are you sending emails late at night? Even though you may tell your employees they don't have to respond to the next day. leaders in our organizations need to be setting the right example. And one final thought, employees who are in senior leadership positions, they need confidential external coaches that they can confide in. You may have heard the phrase, it's lonely at the top, so don't neglect that fact. A lot of companies are doing interesting things, adding more vacation time, having meeting-free days. So Cisco added that. I think a lot of companies followed suit last year. You may want to consider having days that are meeting-free to allow your employees to focus on projects. And then, you may have a lot of other strategies that you have found successful in your organization as well. So let's talk quickly about recovery from burnout. A few things here. You want to recognize, you definitely want to recognize that you may need to seek professional assistance. And we may not be the right person to offer guidance and assistance to our coworkers, because particularly if we haven't been trained in how to do that. Redefine what success means to you. So again, recognize that sometimes you may need to talk to someone outside of your organization. You may need to talk to someone other than a friend even. And then look at what defines success and how you 10 years down the road, looking back, should have defined success. Sometimes that's an easier way to ask yourself that question. Right now, is it pay? Is it job title? Winning awards? What is it now? But what do you think it should be? Should it be time with your family that you're not going to be able to regroup? Should it be more balance in your life? And then rewrite the story of your future. You can edit it from this point forward. Hopefully you don't have to go to the extreme and quit your job. Maybe you can find another job within your organization or write your own job description and present it to your manager and say, these are the kind of things I enjoy doing and what I want to do from this point forward. Can we agree on this? So I would encourage you to take burnout seriously. I know that I used to think that I was Superwoman, that I could handle increased levels of stress. I took pride in the fact that I could handle increased levels of stress until I couldn't anymore. So I don't want you to get to that point. But if you do, you definitely need to act upon it. Okay, so I know we're out of time. Liz, I'm going to let you chime in to see if we wanted to go through any questions that anyone from the audience may have. I did have a couple of things that I wanted to mention. This is a topic that we could speak for hours and hours and hours on, but there's an upcoming conference that the Greenville SHRM Society for Human Resource Management will be holding in August of this year. There's going to be a lot of great topics that will be relevant, not just for HR professionals, but any leaders in an organization. So I want to encourage you to consider, if you want more information about how you can be successful in your career and as a leader, consider our SHRM conference that Greenville's hosting. And then we have another conference that the South Carolina SHRM State Council is putting on later this year, and it's in September. And I will actually be speaking with a clinical psychologist on this topic a little bit further. So I want to thank you again for your time. I'm sorry we ran over, and Liz, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Robyn. You're getting a lot of thanks in the chat box, and we just want to echo those sentiments for sharing your talent with us this morning. Just a couple questions. Folks wanted to see if you could include a link to the training conference in the chat box. So perhaps while I'm asking some of these other questions real quickly. And then also you had mentioned the assessment. Are you experiencing burnout? If you had a link for that, that would be fantastic to share with the group.
Absolutely.
But just a couple questions that I recorded as we went along. Is burnout being considered or being called a mental health condition?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yes. Did you say, is it being, I'm sorry, there's a little static.
Someone asked the question if burnout was being considered or called a mental health condition.
It's not really being considered a mental health condition to my knowledge. Now, it may be worth speaking with a healthcare professional to confirm that. But what I read, according to the World Health Organization, from a global perspective, they have been very careful about the wording that they used in describing burnout. And I think they were doing that so that it wouldn't necessarily be a mental or health diagnosis. Now, there could be ways that it manifests that certainly be a mental health possibly diagnosis. And I think this is important to a lot of individuals too, from a treatment standpoint, in that, how would it be classified under benefit plans? Would it be paid for under benefit plans? Would treatment be paid for? Is it truly a diagnosable health condition? And there may be someone on the line, and if you are, please add that to the chat box. But according to the World Health Organization, they were very careful but not to describe it as a mental health issue.
You're running just a little over, but there was a couple more really good questions that I did want to ask while we're on the line. So is there a sense that job fit plays a role when it comes to burnout? For example, some people may be in a role where they're truly not a fit in terms of their gifts, talents, aptitudes, and passion.
Absolutely. That is one of the 6 main causes. If you think about, and I know it'd be probably too difficult for Andrew to pull up that slide, but it's one of the 6 main causes of burnout. Do people feel that connection with what they're doing day in and day out? So certainly job fit will be one of the factors that could create a burnout situation. You definitely want to operate and work within the types of tasks and that give you strength, or that focus on your strengths and play off of your strengths. And so you want to spend your time doing things you enjoy doing, not things that drain you of your energy, but things that give you more energy. So if you take, for example, someone who is, and I'm going to use a DISC assessment profile here. So if you take someone who is, if you're familiar with DISC, an I, they like social, they like a little bit of risk. Some people like change, who fit into that category, depending on where they are in that spectrum. They like variety. They do not like the day in, day out mundane elements of some jobs. They would not possibly be a good fit for a job that would put them in an office working as an individual contributor with very little social interaction with others. So yes, I think job fit does play a critical role, which is why I think assessments early on in the hiring process, or even in the selection process, but certainly in the onboarding process, would be extremely beneficial, so that you can understand what are the strengths, what are the motivators of your workforce. And so it's a valuable tool for managers to have. But even without an assessment, you can just ask people, right? You can ask your employees, what types of things do you like to do during the day? Are there elements of your job that you really enjoy? What elements of your job do you not enjoy doing? So having those kind of conversations with your employees, you can also get to some of the root causes.
There were a couple questions in the chat that I think you answered during your presentation about how workplace culture also impacts burnout. I just want to let the group know that we're actually going to have a series of webinars or workshops. Actually, they're not going to be, I think we're going to try to do them in person in the fall regarding workplace culture. So if you're on the call and you are a leader in your organization responsible for creating workplace culture, we would encourage you to participate in our Next Level Leadership series on those topics. And so just keep an eye out for information about that. But again, I want to thank everyone on the call today for joining us and also for being so engaged. Robyn, thank you again for giving up your time this morning. Please don't forget that this is an ongoing series. Please join us next month as we're partnering with Google. On July 13th, Google-supported trainer Deming Bass will start the Google series on how to reach customers online with Google. And on the 27th, he'll rejoin us to discuss how to get your local business on Google Search and Maps. We're going to be switching gears a little bit from some of the topics that we've had the past few weeks and going more towards how to market your business. So registration is now open, and we do hope to see you on a future Community Matters webinar. So let's all do our part to care for our community, and I hope you all have a great week.